This is Together, an Ada Bible Church podcast about the world of marriage, where we attempt to invite you to explore the ways marriage works and doesn't work. From practical ways of learning to biblical inspiration, we invite you to listen to other professionals and couples to help enrich your marriage. Here are your hosts, Samuel Jones and Dr. Kelly Bonewell.
Samuel, these next two episodes that we are releasing are really, really important, and they have two very important guests on. And
yes, very important.
Kind of important.
Yeah. Who are they, Kelly?
The first one is Tova Jones.
Oh, my wife. Beautiful.
And the next one is Julie Bonewell.
Her wife.
So this is the first time, everybody's listened to us, and now they get to listen to Julie and Tova. But we threw them in the deep end of the pool.
You did.
And said, hey, probably our listeners want to hear from you guys. Why don't you talk about, there's a lot of different topics we could talk about
I don't know.
In terms of marriage. Why don't you talk about sex?
What a topic.
What a topic. And they hit it out of the ballpark. And I just have so much respect and admiration for what they did, because this is a very difficult topic to talk about. It's a very personal topic to talk about.
It is.
And it's a very complex topic to talk about.
And that's why I think you said to me, when we brought our wives in, we wanted to also make sure we brought someone else in who has been on our podcast before.
Mm-hmm. Sarah Eastway.
Yeah.
And if you haven't listened to we did an episode on sexuality in season 3. 3?
Yep, season 3.
Okay. We've just done so many. Season 3, I think it released last November, and November of 2021. And Sarah and me and Samuel did a really interesting conversation about sexuality and marriage, and this is one to kind of keep it going.
Exactly. And so I think that this is, in this important conversation, our wives, they organically, authentically wanted to just lay out their thought process. And yes, while you may not totally agree with everything that they say, these are two very brave women. Who attend Ada.
And bright women.
Very bright women. Yes, exactly. And they'll talk all about that during the podcast in terms of their journeys. But we want you to just take a second to listen to their thoughts, their heart in regards to sex, in regards to those conversations, and for the fact that they're being our wives, our illustrious wives.
And then we had one other guest, a co-host.
Yeah.
Rachel did an amazing job of kind of facilitating this conversation. And it is a conversation that we really, as a church Ada Bible Church and Church Big Church,
sure,
we need to continue to press into this conversation, because the truth is there's a lot of couples who are struggling in this area. One way to think about this, Samuel, is in Genesis 3, when the fall happened, one of the key verses is that it said that Adam and Eve were naked and ashamed. And I think that's the challenge of sexuality, is it can be shame driven for us. And it's just a very difficult topic to talk about. And so I think Tova, Julie, Sarah, and Rachel did a really amazing job of navigating just a handful of key topics that were important.
Exactly. So with that being said, we want to get you into the episode. One thing we want to encourage you is that if you have small children or those who may not be at a mature age, we would ask that you do not listen to this episode with them near you. We ask that you listen to it with your spouse or with your husband or wife. And so in that space, we're going to start the episode, and this is part 1 of sexuality in marriage.
So here we are. It's women only on this episode. So I am so excited to have you, Tova Jones, married to Samuel, Julie, married to Kelly, and Kelly Bonewell, we know. And then our friend, Sarah Eastway, counselor. And you have been on the podcast before.
Yes,
yeah,
last
so
season.
Yeah, welcome back. In fact, we're gonna head into a conversation that I think is just going to be really important for us and for our listeners too. We hope our listeners feel like they just have a seat at this table, and we can have conversation that's meaningful among just faithful friends. And hopefully it gets a conversation started among others as well. So, we hear about these two in particular, Tova and Julie, on the regular.
Right. Lucky us.
Yes. So we feel like we know you already. Thank you for letting your husband share about you now and then. But now it's our turn to share a little bit about them.
I'm spilling all the beans, Julie.
Okay.
I'm spilling it all.
That's great. And my understanding from the guys is you have full permission to just invite people into some things that have been a real part of your journeys and just hope that it's beneficial to everybody. Yeah. And so this topic, we're talking about sex in marriage. And we're going to talk a bit about, how did that go historically? How's it going now? What are some challenges we can face? And some ways that we can be met by God. But I thought, we all have a story about how we first heard about it. But first, let's hear just a little bit about you, just a little snapshot of your life. Let's start with Tova.
Okay. My name is Tova Jones. It's so funny. I often say, my name is Tova Jones and I'm a wife of a therapist. I kind of lead with that, Julie. I don't know about you, but I'm a wife of a therapist, Sam Jones, who's also on this wonderful podcast. We've been married for 8 years. We've been together for almost 10. So we kind of dated about 2 years. And we have 2 kids. We have a 2-year-old daughter who I call her teenager because
that's
she's
the best.
Oh, man. Someone should have warned me about that. And then I have a 9-month-old son who's just growing every day. And so our life is full and busy, as you can imagine. Yeah. So, yeah.
You're already taking us back.
Man,
the kids are little there. So
give me hope that I can get over this hump.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So how about Julie? Tell us a little bit about your life.
Julie Bonewell, Kelly's wife. We've been married for more than 25 years. And we have 2 boys. Both of them got married in the past 2 years. So I have 2 brand new daughter-in-laws, which has been a lot of fun. And I'm a nurse. I have been a nurse for many years as well, and most of my career was in maternal child health, so hoping to draw from some of that experience as well as my personal experience talking about today.
Wow, awesome. It is so good to have your voices in this conversation. I know. And how about Sarah Eastway?
Yes, I am Sarah. I work as a therapist. I office out of Forest Hills Counseling Center. I've been married to Kevin we're on year 16 now, and we also have 2 boys at home. We have a 5th grader and a 3rd grader. So just kicking off that school year and hoping to get back into some good routines.
Awesome. And how long you been a counselor?
I saw clients starting in 2009. So what is that? 13 years? Where do we at? Yeah.
Hey, not the war.
Right on our fingers like 19.
I know. And let's bounce the conversational ball to you first, Sarah. How'd you first hear about sex? And then we'd love to hear, how did that impact your view of sex in marriage, especially starting out?
Yeah. Well, I just the broad concept of sex I got exposed to. I have extended family who are farmers. And so growing up going to farms, I mean, when you have cattle and livestock, it's just there happening.
It's natural.
I feel like it just in nature, that part of it. I think personally, I did grow up in the purity culture time, but I had youth group leaders that it would come up and it was always talked about as this wonderful thing that you wait and share with your spouse. Okay. And so I did get the message of wait, don't do it. But I also got the message of, and when you do it, it should be a positive thing. And then finally, right before I got married, I was very grateful. I had girlfriends who had already been married and who, or had already been having sex and who knew that I was waiting. And so they thankfully took me aside and had some good conversations just about some of the more nitty gritty things to expect. And I'm so thankful for that because I don't think that is done nearly enough in our church community.
Do you think that's kind of becoming a thing?
I hope so.
Okay.
I hope so.
And the ones who've been married for a little bit, like my daughter is a young adult, and a lot of her friends are getting married, and that's from my seat on the bus. It seems like that's becoming a thing in her world.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. And then how about Julie?
Yeah, so I was in middle school, and my parents gave me a book written by Dr. Dobson, and
Our friend, Dr. James Dobson.
that was the extent of my education.
That was the conversation. Did they say anything when they gave you the book even?
No,
Oh, wow.
no conversation. It was kind of a taboo topic, you know, and shame. Really, kind of that kind of approach, even within a marriage. It's just not something you talk about. I also grew up in the country, so kind of had a little bit of that farm experience as well. But when it came to how do you actually navigate your sexuality, both before you're married and then when you're married, very little mentoring, and kind of went into marriage a little bit naive about that topic and how to handle it.
That's so fair. That's so fair. Now, Tova, did you just glean? We're kind of sitting down with farm girls.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. And I'm sitting
Second
here like,
generation.
I know.
I don't know. How about you?
And I'm a straight city girl, so I didn't get none of that. I think for me, my very first introduction to sex was a scare tactic. Like, so I grew up in the church as well. But I also grew up in a time where like teenage pregnancy was like a thing. And so my mom would just like, you know, you get pregnant, you have sex, you're getting kicked out. Like that was like the scare tactic for me. So I'm like, oh God, I don't want to leave, you know? And so that's how I really found out about it. As I got older, I began to realize that sex was a great thing. It was a good thing. And that, you know, conversations needed to be had about it. But literally my first thought of sex was like, don't have it because you're going to get pregnant. And so don't you dare. And that was my first introduction to sex. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. You scared me.
You're ultimately she's trying to protect you and your early understanding. So how did that affect your view of marriage, of sex in marriage? And then maybe even just take us right into, what did it look like earlier on in your marriage?
Yeah, I would say so. I, unfortunately, and I would say unfortunately, I didn't wait to have sex. I was in my early 20s when I lost my virginity, and I thought I was pregnant, like immediately. And the person I was like, no way, you're not pregnant. So going into marriage, Sam and I had conversations about like, so when do we want kids and things like that, because I always associated sex with babies. I mean, which God created for us to procreate and things like that. But as we got into our dating life and then our premarital counseling, we made it a point to talk about our sexual needs. So Sam and I waited until we were married to have sex. And so we didn't often talk about sex because it got hot and steamy sometimes. And we're like, no, let me go, let you go. Let's simmer down. But when we took our premarital counseling with our pastors, that was definitely a conversation that we had. So we kind of went into our marriage with some expectations about what we wanted our sex life to be. And unfortunately, it did not go the way we thought. I think so many times in marriages, sex is natural. But with your partner, it takes some work, right? To get used to one another's body, to get used to what each other's preferences. And so for like the first 4 to 5 years, Sam and I bumped heads continuously with our sex life.
Okay.
So it was just like he wanted it all the time and I did not. He wanted it one type of way and I did not. So it took some time and some effort for us to really begin to mesh and to be able to have conversations about it without offending one another. And I think that was the point in which we realized, like, hey, if we want our sex life to be great, and we know that sex is a huge part of marriage, it's not the most important, but it plays a huge part, we have to be vulnerable and open to talk about each other's needs. And it took a minute for us to get on that right path.
Yeah, well, and just the idea that it took it took work. You know, I think when we talk about our other exposures to sex before marriage or leading into it and even after, when you see media representations of it, it's easy. It all just goes and happens and everybody's happy. And so if that's your idea, then you are, you know, doomed to, to realize, and why didn't it just happen perfectly for us?
And I think that's where our process was. We were like, why aren't we like meshing it? Like, I know I'm sexually attracted to you. You're sexually attracted to me. I feel like we should be in the movies, coming in the house, kissing and stuff. It hadn't seen me, but it wasn't. And it took work. And we went into the conversations that we had. It took us about a year to be able to be like, okay, what we're doing right now isn't working. You're not feeling satisfied, Sam. I'm not feeling satisfied. What can we do? And we had to have some pretty hard conversations. And sometimes I cried. Sometimes he was upset. But at the core of it, we knew that we loved each other. And our ultimate goal wasn't to offend one another. So I had to take it as, hey, he loves you. He just wants you to be the one to fulfill the need that he wants from you. And so at the same time, we were beginning to talk about wanting to have children. So we like, if we're going to have sex to have children, let's make it enjoyable, right? Like, let's, you know, we don't want it to be robotic or whatever. Let's really enjoy it. So it took us 5 years to get pregnant, finally.
Okay.
And a couple months before I got pregnant, y'all, we were on like a good sex streak. Like, we had finally meshed. We had finally had our conversations. It was awesome.
So the work paid off.
The work paid off.
It was able to look a whole lot better.
Yeah, a whole lot better with a lot of trial and error, a lot of conversations. And so we went away. One of our friends was like, you want to get pregnant? You need to go away. Like, go on a vacation. So we took a cruise and we're like, we're going to have fun, but we're going to relax and we're going to try to have this baby. And sure enough, I got pregnant. And so
the answer is go on a cruise.
Listen, go on a cruise. Don't think too much about it. Relax and have a blast.
Sure.
And so we were so excited when, you know, I got the news about being pregnant, but then our sex life took another turn, right? Yeah. Because I'm pregnant. I'm not feeling like it. And I'm not even all the way feeling Sam at this point. Like, my hormones was making him smell funny. Sorry, Sam. I'm telling this story. He's probably going to kick me.
Real.
Pregnancy real. Yeah.
Right. Like, my aversion was to him and he felt so bad. I'm like, you smell like meat, Sam. I can't, whatever it was, your cologne, whatever. And so that took a turn and it was kind of abrupt for him because we had just came off of a great year of like good sex. And he's just like, we had just got to this point. Now you're pregnant. And so we had another conversation. I'm like, okay, Sam, this pregnancy, I'm feeling nauseous. I'm tired. Like, I don't have the energy to do it. And he gave me grace. In that moment, he was like, I understand. I see what you're going through. But when this baby come, I need us to get back to normal. And so with that, of course, you go through postpartum. You go through different things like that. And so we had to have a whole nother conversation and begin to work. How do we have sex with a newborn baby? How do we navigate this? How do we get time alone? You know, we're sleep deprived. So that was a whole nother conversation that we had to have. And so we began to get some terms and conditions and it began to work out well. And then boom, I got pregnant again. I'm like, Sam, what? He's like, it took us 5 years to have one. Now we're having kids back to back. I'm like, okay, Sam. So now I've been through this pregnancy with you. You still smell like meat. You still in this pregnancy.
So both pregnancies. Similar aversions.
Okay. But this time I was able to kind of push through because I'm like, not that I felt bad, not that it was sympathy sex, but I'm like, Lord, I literally had to pray, like, Lord, give me strength, right? Because I don't want my husband to feel unfulfilled. And I think a lot of times in marriage, we don't even think about praying about our sex life. I feel like a lot of us believe that God doesn't care about our sex life, when in reality, he really does. And as women, I know sometimes we wear so many different hats, and sometimes we're exhausted, right? Where we're the mom, the nurse, the teacher, the cook, the meal prepper, like we're all of it. And sometimes we need some supernatural strength to push through.
Well, let me ask the other. So, Julie, you have 2 kids, and Sarah, you do as well. Do you remember back to when the kids were little and there was just so much physical care you were providing for the kids, and, you know, literally holding them all day? And do you remember that being kind of hard?
Yes.
Like you've been touched all day?
Yes, I called them my Velcro days, when they're just needier. And so you felt like they just wanted to be stuck to you.
Yes.
And it's hard then at the end of those days to crawl into bed and then want to have more physical touch. You're just like, I'm ready to fall asleep, or I am ready to just have my space and be my own person. So we really had to look at, okay, when else in the day can we have sex? Because we know that by the time I hit, 7 o'clock, I've had it with being touched. And so how do we look at morning, afternoon? How can we get creative and make time for it?
Awesome.
So I don't know, are we getting practical as far as kids watching Netflix and you go in the back room? I remember having other young married couples with young children, and babysitters are expensive, so we would do babysitting swap, and sometimes we didn't go out for a date. We were like, okay, well, sex isn't happening on its own, so I guess today's date is grabbing Subway and going back home. Really needing to make it happen, because otherwise, I think as a tired mom, it's easy to let it fall off your radar or get on that back burner. And so just needing to talk about it.
That is so helpful. And Julie, you were nodding your head. You remember back then too. And so what do you remember of it? And how would you advise somebody who's just in it right now?
Yeah, I think these guys have shared a lot of good tips already. My kids were real close together as well. So, 4 years straight of breastfeeding. I was working during that time. And so breastfeeding a lot during the night. And those are just tough years. And even, a few years later, yes, we could put them in front of, back then it was a DVD.
True confession.
Right. But when they're really young, then it does get really challenging, and the babysitters or getting away for a weekend becomes really, really important.
Awesome. And we were not good about getting away at all, and our parents helped us make it a priority.
Oh, good.
Like for Christmas presents, it would be the bed and breakfast, and we're taking the kids, and because we just wouldn't have made time for it in that crazy time of life. And I thought that's just such wisdom. Such wisdom. Yeah. So Tova, it's a couple things from what you already shared. You shared with us you had a relationship prior to getting married, and yet you took fresh steps to move beyond your past and to honor God in your present as you were looking to get married to Samuel. And then you went from kind of no to go.
Yes.
And that was its own journey. Yeah. Took a while, and then these aversions when you finally got really good. You guys worked at it. Then you had these aversions. Baby got a little better in between. Boom, baby number 2. And then what? That's kind of where we left off.
Yeah. And so, we're here now, right? So after baby number 2, this is where we are now. And it's so funny, Sam and I, we make it a point to do check-ins, right? So Sam is a person that I think it's because he's a therapist too. He takes time to process and really think about things before he says them, whereas I am very direct. And so we have to make sure that we're checking in with one another to make sure that we're satisfied. And I didn't even mention this, that touch is Sam's number 1 love language. It is my very last one.
Okay. And that's how it goes. Right?
So we always have to find that balance to make sure that he's fulfilled and I'm not overtouched, right? That I'm just turned completely off. And so where we are now in this space is really just being open and honest. Kelly gave us some great advice. Go ahead and schedule sex. Put it on the calendar. Sam is the type of guy that if it's not on the calendar, it is not for real. It does not exist if it is not on the Google Calendar. When he first brought that to me, because Kelly advised him to do that, I was like, what do you mean to put it on the calendar? Like, where's the spontaneity in it? Like, where's the pizzazz? And when we started doing it, I was able to be spontaneous, right? Because I knew on Wednesday at 7:00 we had a sitter or a mother-in-law, and I can do different things. We can do dinner. We can do, and that helped us so much. Wow. And so now we're at the point in which we want to keep it constant, because things do come up. But also just taking time to really talk about the quality of our sex life. Right now we're getting ready to shift into a different season with both of our careers, and it won't be so much about quantity, it'll be about quality. And when I heard that statement before about sex, about it's not so much about, for some people the quantity matters, but if you can have quality sex over quantity, those experiences become so much more fulfilling. Instead of like, it's Wednesday, let's come on and, do it. Let's focus on the quality and the experience of sex. So that's where we are now, focusing on the quality of our sex life. So
great. Yeah. Well, you had shared too that you guys took a step, like you had some healthy conversation about it and recognized like we are not doing well in this department. And you made an appointment. Tell us about that.
Yes. You guys, we made an appointment to see a sex therapist. And we loved it too, but the therapist was not good. It was
not a good fit.
I think no. So this particular sex therapist, so we went away and we were like, let's go meet with someone, out in another state, or, let's just talk. And so we just thought it was going to be this spicy experience and she was going to give us like tips and tricks and all this kind of stuff. It was really like a PowerPoint and a book. And we were just like, this isn't going to work. So we continued to find more people and we found someone and it's good.
And that's an important thing to know, that you can take some shopping to find the right fit. Because what's a good fit for one person might not be for another. And so I'm so glad that you didn't just walk away from one negative experience. But you kept looking.
Definitely. I think in our mind we had this like, I don't know what we thought. Even Sam as a therapist, he was just like, he was like, I could have did this. But I'm like, I don't know. We had this idea that it was going to just be a little bit more spicier, and it wasn't. And to the therapist's credit, she was used to working with people who weren't able, like they had like sexual conditions and things like that, so they weren't able to perform like they wanted to. It wasn't her specialty wasn't so much of like, we're married, we want to try different things
She's
out.
More troubleshooting problems.
Yes, and so that probably was a little research error on our end, but yeah, so we're still searching and still trying to find different ways to jazz up our quality of
You
sex.
mentioned spicy, and I forgot years ago, the Gottman Institute, they're therapists, and they have this stack, it's like a card set, and they're salsa cards, and they're all about ways to connect, and there's mild, medium, and spicy. And it's just cards that you can buy, and then you and your spouse can look through them and decide, maybe I give you these 2 cards and say, hey, over the next month. And it can be things like a shoulder rub, or very just connecting physically, emotionally, to trying some new stuff you never thought you would try, and everything in between. So
I love that. Yeah, I love that, and I love how you said like different things, because what we're finding too is that for me and for him too, back to the quality of sex, it happens throughout the whole day, right? It's just not at 7:00 when we're ready to, have sex. Right. But like throughout the day, what are little things that we can do? Send a text, send flowers, clean up the house, whatever we need to do to make us ready for that moment.
Because then it's more relational, and it's not just the transaction, right? Expanding sex is not just intercourse. Sex is our way of loving each other through physical intimacy. And that can look like a lot of different things. And I think we get into a rut when we only think of sex as intercourse.
Yep.
Sure.
Not that there's anything wrong with intercourse,
Yeah.
but we got to expand. We gotta,
And I'm finding that even for me with the stage of life we're in, him cleaning up the house or tidying up, that turns me on more than a back rub. Him taking initiative to do things that right there, I'm like, yes, husband. Perfect. And so I'm just thinking like what you said is more than just the intercourse part. It's the other things that happens throughout the day, throughout the week that can get us to that point. So
I love that. Super helpful. And I was talking with a friend recently, and she said, just doing this just got me talking with my friends more about it. Like even just questions that surfaced. And we're having great conversation. I highly recommend it between faithful friends.
Yeah.
And so just even a check-in, like, how's that been going for you lately? And she said, I do recognize that as a huge priority in our marriage. Like, I am his person for that. And I want that to stay healthy, And so even like when my drive takes a hit, I really bring that to the Lord.
Yeah.
And that I want that to kind of stay on the schedule. And I want us to keep having healthy conversation about it. And if you're like me, it was, it took me a while to get comfortable, and to even start talking about it. So I think that can take a little time and it's okay, to slowly start talking about it more.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, and I think being able to talk about it helps with some of the nuts and bolts. So when I think back to, or when I work with clients who are in those baby years, there are some logistics like perhaps you do tear badly. And so now you're not going to want to have intercourse for a while until you can heal.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just being real. And so, okay. But what else can you do? So is that when manual or oral options are more available? Like, how else can you connect? And, or I know some breastfeeding moms, when they're breastfeeding, they want to wear a bra during intercourse because that just helps with leakage. And they just feel like, okay, it helps them be more into the sexual experience with their husband if they're not worrying about their boobs.
Okay, we just got real.
Right. But it's
that
true.
Is so real.
Yeah,
so
but
true.
it's just, it's those nuts and bolts that I think there are people out there, when you're not talking about it, you're thinking, oh, I don't want to have sex because then my breasts leak. And so having a friend be like, oh, well, I just kept my bra on during that time. And you're, oh, why didn't I think about that?
Right.
And so
I didn't know that was allowed.
Right.
So just being able to have ideas to consider.
Awesome.
I love
that. Thank you, Tova. And something else that we love about what you shared today is that you guys aren't yet where you want to be.
For sure.
You're on the journey. You're taking steps in a great direction.
Yeah.
And thank you for your transparency.
No problem. Love you, Sam.
I love it. And so now Kelly's bride, Julie, is going to get to share a little bit. And, you were raised during this purity culture, I think you had shared too. Could you tell us what that is, first of all? Because some people might not know that language. So what did that look like? And then how did that impact your view of marriage heading in? And how did it go kind of early on?
Yeah, the purity culture was just kind of a just say no period. And, at least for me, it was counseled of sex is for marriage. We shouldn't even be talking about it right now. You should. And so without many tools for how you get there. And some of the books that came out during that time were I Just Kissed Dating Goodbye, meaning, I don't even have much a relationship perhaps with the person I end up marrying because I want to stay so pure. So some pretty intense that, and looking back now, perhaps not a healthy way to approach and talk about sexuality within marriage, before marriage. How do you handle your sexuality before you're married, or within the church? And I think that's part of what our conversation is about today, is how can we make our conversations about sex more of a normal, healthy thing in the church, and make sure that the married couples in our church know what know that this is an important part of their marriage that God wants them to have.
Definitely.
And how do they pursue that?
And I think all the Tovas need a Julie, right? Somebody who's been married a lot longer, and
Absolutely.
For sure.
others can learn from our experience, and And so tell us about your experience, Julie, early on. You went from that mindset, and then you're married, and away you go.
And then we're married, and we had kids really early in our marriage, so we didn't even have very much of a honeymoon period. We went right into the time period that Tova and Sam are in now, and so we're just in it. And so I think about the next time we picked up our heads, what I remember was our 10th anniversary trip when we went down to Miami. In-laws had the kids, so longest we'd been away from our children so far in our marriage, and great time. But at that stage, I was still 10 years into marriage, dealing with a lot of shame and a lot of discomfort about my body, and I didn't know my body very well. And here I am, a nurse. I studied the anatomy and physiology in college, and still personally just not feeling very comfortable with that. Then that just took a lot of, again, conversation, working through it. And then the other thing that kind of happened to me at the same time is I went into perimenopause at the same time. So just when we're getting to the point where, kids are a little older, sex life can be a little easier, all of a sudden my body isn't cooperating.
Always changes. Yes.
Yeah.
Can we ask, what helped you get from pretty uncomfortable, because sex was in the kind of shamey department, to kind of uncomfortable early on to just getting more comfortable?
Just continued conversations with Kelly.
Conversation again.
Tova and Samuel have been talking about is, but I think it, again, just because I came out of that culture and background, it took me, I don't necessarily know it took Kelly, but it took me a lot longer to get there and feel comfortable, and really be able to be more open and really understand more how my body works, and just be more comfortable with our sexual relationship.
And I think with your sexuality overall, I think when you're in the purity culture, you're in the, being told to be modest and all of these things, you can even view your body as, it's not supposed to be sexual.
Absolutely.
So even the idea of how do we just become comfortable with our own sensuality, with our own sexuality, with the idea that our bodies, as odd as they might be in some ways, or as, how the physiological part of all of them, they're also beautiful, and can we own that? And it's hard if that's not taught to you and you're given the opposite message.
Sarah, it is hard.
Yeah.
It really is a thing for a lot of us.
Yeah.
It took a while. Yeah, like I said, 10 years in our marriage, and we were still working through that. So
some of the physical, but even recognizing some mental blocks sometimes for me personally that I need to address and just get right thinking, right? And who helps us with that, right? That's something we also pray through, and maybe it's an appointment or two or more than that.
And, back then there really weren't the therapists to that.
Okay.
Therapy wasn't as much of a thing as it is now, and resources like Samuel and Kelly and were not available. And so now we have a lot more access to that, and we can be mentoring and supporting each other more.
So you got to this more comfortable stage. You kind of got your thinking changed a little bit. And then you mentioned this perimenopausal thing, and then all these hormonal shifts, and that's just part of the journey. So can you invite us into that stage? Some of the friends among us are not there yet, and I think
will be.
Yeah, you will be. and that's again where I think we need to have conversation about this, so that when we get there, we're already more prepared. So tell us about that, Julie.
Yeah. So one of the challenge we also dealt with was how many kids, timing of our pregnancies, what was our plan for that? And so needed to deal with birth control. And again, the birth control options available back then weren't as good as some of them that are available now. And I ended up on a birth control option that caused me significant side effects. And I do think that's something that women may still be dealing with today.
Oh, absolutely.
And just want to encourage folks to have that conversation with their provider then, and make sure that they're not just saying, hey, I don't feel good when I'm on this birth control, and so that's impacting our sex life. Make sure you have that conversation with your provider, and there may be other options for you.
I find doctors are asking more too.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. So getting into that phase, though, the hormonal factor. So talk about some challenges that you and Kelly have faced in that regard, in this connect, because now you're at empty nester stage, and even you've had some health things. You've struggled with your health in ways you had not imagined. That can also affect our sex life. So how'd that affect yours?
Yeah. So I ended up needing hormone replacement therapy pretty early, and have been on that for a long time. And that's another thing that I think women are very concerned about. Years ago, there was some research that probably wasn't interpreted very correctly about saying hormone replacement therapy wasn't good. Now it's not seen that way. It's
There's a lot more options now. It's come a long way.
Much more bioidentical. But that can really have an impact. If my estrogen is low, if my testosterone is low, my body just isn't going to feel sexual. And I would say, and we were trying to have be intimate, and I'm like, that feels about as good as if you're rubbing my elbow. I mean,
unaffected.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just also for me, like I had some of those mental blocks, trying to sort through, is this a mental block? Is this a physical block? Which part of this very complex
some of both
body,
right.
What's going on here? And that took a lot of sorting through and figuring out, and still dealing with some of that today.
And you mentioned that doctors are asking more. And I think just like anything, people are seeing a variety of responses from their doctors. So I still hear people who go to their doctor and they say, I'm having trouble having sex. My sex drive is low, or it hurts. And they're hearing, it's in your head, or, so it, or, just just relax more, right?
Yeah.
So, but there are others out there who are going to more troubleshoot. And so really knowing that we need to advocate for ourselves. And so if we don't happen to currently have a doctor who's willing to listen to us and work with us, I mean, we live in a big enough town where we have some options.
Sure.
And so trying to find another therapist or another doctor. And that's, again, where asking your friends, hey, anybody have a doctor that has really been able to help them with, sex drive or sex issues or pain or whatever it might be, if it's the hormonal thing or hormone replacement.
There are a lot more practices out there that specialize in this area specifically. And so definitely, if you're not feeling like you're getting the care you need from your physician, seek a second opinion. There are a lot of resources in West Michigan for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with the hormonal changes and having some health things too, what are some very specific challenges women can have when you get around to that menopause time of life?
Yeah.
More lubrication is what I hear from. That's like across the board, because things are just, your body is drier. And so if you could have gone your whole adult life not needing very much lube at all, and all of a sudden you need it.
Yeah.
So there's a practical one.
Yeah, and that's something that can be affected by hormone replacement therapy too.
Okay.
And if hopefully if you're on the replacement therapy that works for you, that will become less of an issue. Maybe not completely go away, but become less of an issue. So definitely something to pursue. I think the other time that started to become a challenge, I started dealing with fibroids. And had very heavy, painful periods, and had a hysterectomy 10 years ago already. So working up into that time when I needed to have the hysterectomy again, like a week every month, where I'm like, oh my, I'm in pain. Don't touch me.
Yes.
And not that I'd recommend this for everyone, but then, having that hysterectomy definitely was a relief there, and just another good step for us, for me personally, in that journey, and just was a help at that time. Yeah.
And I've heard of some things that you and Kelly do just to kind of keep it fun, right? We've talked about that earlier in our conversation. And so are there some things that come to your mind that kind of keep it fun and build in just that dynamic that Tova was talking about earlier, like, hey,
Spicy.
today's our day, or what's on the
Right.
calendar, or, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, we are definitely in that second honeymoon time, empty nesters. So just a lot more freedom as far as timing, and we don't have kids around, and so just being able to the scheduling is part of that. Preparing your mind for it, and that's part of the fun of it. Is
okay.
How about we meet at 3:00? Am I on your calendar for that? And just put that down, or just teasing each other during the day. Maybe some things you wouldn't be saying in front of your little kiddos. Now they're not there, so
doesn't matter what time.
Right.
Yeah, that's so helpful too. I know in prior conversations we were talking about, in the couple, like, sex is God's great idea, and He has a mind for it to be something that is enjoyable for both of you. I think one of you said before, like, you should both be able to have that time of physical intimacy with one another, and end with kind of a wow.
Yeah.
What if you don't? What do you do? And what if that's a problem?
Yeah, that is the ideal state, and you're going to get there sometimes. And I think, but that's part of growing with each other as well. As sometimes it's going to work for me and not for him, and sometimes it's going to work for him and not for me. And being okay with that. Not, hope the goal is that it's not that way all the time. Yeah. But sometimes that's the way it is going to be, and that's okay. And that's not a failure. That's not oh man, we blew it again, or that's just life. And but really, with that goal of having sometimes, or you get to the point where you're so in sync with each other that you do have sometimes where it's like, wow, that was cool.
Yeah.
And again, the communicating about it. I mean, I think, so I know people who rearrange their living room furniture 12 times before they decide how it's going to be, right? Or you think about how much we talk about what we want to do for a vacation, or all these things we talk about. But then when it comes to sex, we get in a rut thinking, well, there's only like one or two ways to approach it. And so if we're willing to have all these conversations and try all of these things with the other things in life, why is it so hard to do that with sex? And so just trying to have more of those conversations, so you can throw ideas out there, so you can say, hey, I'm not enjoying it right now. Maybe we try this or that. And
let's recognize sometimes then I think they'll feel like they're failing in some regard, right? Like, there's a fragility there that we want to be careful with. And yet we got to have the conversation. And I love, you said earlier too, it's not always just about intercourse. So sometimes it's not a wow for both people, but we were still together.
Absolutely.
And I think you think about it, like, we aren't perfect, but we're progressing, right? And we have, not forever, like time wise, but we have our whole marriage to continue to build upon this. And I think so much so for men, it's such a fragile thing to say if we, aren't satisfied. But I have to look at it like this. If in instances, if I'm not satisfied, I'm going to say something and come with a solution. So maybe it's right, I didn't like it this way, but next time let's try it this way. Not so much in like, you sucked. You know what I'm saying? Like, this was not good, but more so like, why was it? I didn't like it because my leg was hurting this whole time. Like, let's try a different way. And I think, I can't speak for all men, but for my husband, when I'm unsatisfied but come with a solution or like a next time scenario, it makes him feel better. It makes him like, okay, something to look forward to. We can try it again.
Yeah. So. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about how to have these conversations more, because you all either are a therapist or you're married to one. So I just feel like that's not fair at all. Because sometimes I think we don't know how to talk about it. And then are they supposed to read our minds? They would love to know.
Right.
How that would just go better.
It's a sensitive topic.
So sensitive.
There's feelings of inadequacy potentially, and fears. And so we need some tips on how to talk about this in a better way if when you're trying, it's just not working, or it's leading to arguments or anger or sadness or rejection.
Nice. Well, Tova, you spoke earlier about how you just learned to pray some things through. Like, God wants your sex life to go well.
Yeah.
And you brought that to him. How about Julie? How has this impacted your faith, or your faith impacted this?
Wow, I think just realizing what an incredible creation the human body is. And I think, like Sarah and Kelly and Samuel talked about in the last podcast, the fact that God created our sexuality and said it was good, and really its purpose is our enjoyment within the intimacy of our marriage. And how cool is that? And so I think we're just it's a part of us even bringing us into a closer relationship with God as we become to appreciate that part of ourselves and our bodies, and really realize that we are mind, body, and spirit, and that our body is created and is good and is there for us to enjoy within our marriage.
Right. And learn how the body works. And and that's just a new part, like when we get married. And I know with us having young adult kids too, I've tried to throughout their upbringing, like, we all talked about, or you all talked about how you first heard about sex, or don't talk about it all, or just a book. So it's like, all right, I don't want to do that as a mom. So just really trying to share with them, like, it is a gift from God. Like, it's super special, and it's just between us.
Yeah.
And so it is worth waiting for,
For sure.
Yeah.
And so thank you. I think we're just getting started. We surfaced some challenges that, we can have in sexual intimacy in marriage. And we want to talk about that more on the next episode. And Sarah, we're glad you're here, because we're going to put you on the hot seat for that one too. And just kind of talk about, because we touched on some topics, but you also see some themes as you are connecting with women and couples through your counseling. And so we'd love to benefit from that too, and talk a little bit about your experience on our next episode. Thank you so much for joining us for this first part of the conversation, this first episode. And we've had Tova Jones, Julie Bonewell, and Sarah Eastway with us. And here's what we'd like to ask you to do. Share this episode with some friends, and then invite them to join us for part 2 of this podcast and this episode of Together, an Ada Bible podcast. We will catch you for the next part of the conversation.
Thanks for listening to Together. We hope you've learned a thing or two. If you find the podcast helpful, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your listening platform, leave a comment, and give us a 5-star rating. If you'd like more information on Ada Bible Church and its ministries, or someone to pray or dialogue with about your marriage, go online and check out our website at adabible.org.